everybody, welcome back to the Let's Review Show. I will be your host today, John, and this is the weekly show where I'll review pretty much as many movies as I can, anything that I've seen in the last week. And I don't got any 4K Blu-ray reviews for you guys on this week's show, but I do have a few movie reviews. We're also going to have our director reviews this week, so we're going to be reviewing the new Alien movie, Alien Romulus. We'll also be reviewing the 2001 film Joyride and the 2020 horror film The Night House. And we're going to start it off with the big one, the big movie this past week that made over $100 million at the box office. And that film is, of course, Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus. And this takes place between the first Alien and the second Alien film, Aliens, the first Alien film directed by Ridley Scott, the second one directed by James Cameron. So those are some big shoes to fill for Fede Alvarez. In my personal opinion, we haven't had a good Alien movie since Aliens in 1986. Now, Alien 3 is acceptable. I do not like the fourth Alien film. The two Alien vs. Predator movies, I have a little bit of a soft spot for AVP just because it was a good theater experience for me, and, you know, that can go a long way. The second AVP movie, not that great. The last two Alien movies, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, I think they had their moments, but they are not good movies to me, in my opinion. Prometheus, a little bit more than Covenant. At least Prometheus, I like what they were going for with that movie. But, you know, realistically, I'm only ever watching Alien and Aliens, very comparable to the Terminator franchise. But, you know, I had my hopes up for Alien Romulus just a little bit, only because they were doing certain things that I personally like in a movie. They were going to use practical sets again. Also, it seemed like there was a lot of care put into this movie. Kaylee Spaney was the star of this film, and she's really on a roll. You know, it really started back with Mayor of Easttown, then last year in Priscilla, and then this year she was in Civil War and this movie, so she's really going for it. And, of course, you know, I just want there to be a good Alien movie. That's just something I always want. You know, I don't want to go into these movies hoping that it's bad, but, you know, once I heard everything about this movie, I started to get my hopes up a little bit. Of course, I am worried about what they are doing with these kind of like legacy sequels and kind of changing the timeline that we know. I kind of get a little bit worried about those things. So going into this movie, I was excited, but I was also skeptical at the same time. And luckily for me, I really enjoyed Alien Romulus. Was it as good as everybody is saying? In my opinion, no, it's a little bit overhyped, but, you know, it's going to really come down to what you like in an Alien movie and, you know, really what you're looking for. I saw someone compare this to, the first thing I saw really when I was searching the internet is that Alien Romulus was basically The Force Awakens. And I'm like, okay, they're saying that like it's a bad thing, but here's the problem. I really like The Force Awakens. That's actually my third favorite Star Wars movie. Is it basically A New Hope all over again with new characters? Yeah, I could see that, but I also really appreciate the production design of the movie, and I really like the new characters. I got attached to them in The Force Awakens. Everything that happens after The Force Awakens is a whole different story, but if we look at The Force Awakens in a bubble, I think that is a fantastic film. Now, going into Alien Romulus, I was like, okay, if that's really a comparison, I might like Alien Romulus. And you know what? It is a good comparison, but I like Alien Romulus just a little bit less than The Force Awakens. Unfortunately, all those callbacks and kind of recreating scenes and, you know, saying literally lines from previous Alien movies, you know, all that stuff can just feel a little bit forced. And, you know, I'll be rolling my eyes, but I feel like I'm in the minority in that because the rest of the theater was cheering when this all happened. So I'm like, okay, maybe I feel this way, but not everybody else feels this way about these callbacks. I feel like you're kind of beating a dead horse, and the plot of this movie is very similar to the original Alien movie, kind of throwing in some new ideas, some new themes. Obviously, artificial intelligence is a big theme throughout the entire Alien franchise. Corporations, that's something I love about the original Alien movie. The company, that's a big theme in this movie, especially since it takes place 20 years after the original Alien movie. I love that stuff, calling out corporations for what they are, you know, and how our main characters right in the beginning of the movie, they get screwed over. You know, Kaylee Spaney's character, she's traveling with her brother, not a real brother. He's actually an AI, you know, kind of a forgotten one at that, played by David Johnson. Out of all the performances in Alien Romulus, David Johnson gives the best performance, a star-making performance as this artificial intelligence, and he is really the best part of this movie, in my opinion, from an acting standpoint. Kaylee Spaney is great as well as the lead, but again, you know, that kind of feels like we're trying to get the Ridley character again and recreate that, so it kind of feels like Ridley light. it doesn't feel like, in my opinion at least, I know people probably disagree with me, that it's an original character, whereas David Johnson's character, he is fantastic in this movie. And then, of course, one thing I was looking forward to, we're seeing those practical sets. And, we start this movie off very similar to how we start the original Alien movie off, with the lights turning on. And, we get a look at those sets. They really built sets. It really does feel like sets in the Alien universe. They're dirty and worn out, giving something for the actors to really act against, something that I always complain about with modern CGI filled movies where, what do they ever the hell they call that at Disney, where, they're basically acting against a giant green screen, or, they're able to actually put on fake backgrounds, but it's still a fake background. They're still not real sets, and to have real build sets, which was such a big deal with the original Alien movie, to have that back in this film, it feels like this movie is just a beautiful looking film. It doesn't feel generic as far as the cinematography goes. The score for this movie is fantastic. All that stuff I love about Alien Romulus. The score, the production design, the acting is pretty good. I don't think it's great, but I think it's pretty damn good. Everyone is at least trying. I have those eye-rolling moments where I have some issues with the plot and story, but overall, I think it's a great Alien movie. Now, it's not a real high bar to say that this is the third best Alien movie, but I genuinely believe it is the third best Alien movie, and it's definitely one you can watch when you're watching Alien and Aliens, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I just didn't love this movie as much as other people did, and right now I'm kind of between a 7.5 and an 8 for this film, so overall, I would give Alien Romulus a score of a 7.5 out of 10. I definitely think it's worth your time, and if you can check this one out in IMAX, it's just mixed so well as far as the sound design goes, and it's designed for IMAX, and that is definitely the best way to experience this movie. So check out Alien Romulus if you could. It's definitely better than most people are probably expecting it when they heard about this movie when it was first announced, but if the hype was there for those trailers, I think it actually finally lives up to it, and we actually have a good movie in the Alien franchise. The first good movie to come out in my lifetime. I think Alien 3 came out the year I was born, but, we won't count that one. I don't really think it's a great movie, but it does have its supporters. So definitely check out Alien Romulus. Alright, the next one up is 2001's Joyride, and this one was directed by John Dahl. It was actually co-written and co-produced by J.J. Abrams, and you can honestly see that while watching this movie, and this is the director's review choice for Mr. Smelly Potato this month. So if you're a channel director, I will do a review of your choice each and every single month, and this month Mr. Smelly Potato wanted me to review 2001's Joyride, and this movie I had seen before, but I hadn't seen it in many, many years. From what I remembered, I did enjoy it, but I don't know why. I never really ran back to it. I was actually going to pick up the Blu-ray for this review, but it cost a little bit too much money for my taste, and after watching the actual Amazon Prime stream for this, it's a very good-looking movie, and would definitely translate very well to the 4K Blu-ray format, so if this ever does come to 4K Blu-ray, I will definitely pick it up, because it definitely looked fantastic. And the cast, one of the most underrated actors of all time, Steve Zahn stars in this movie, and it features Paul Walker the very same year as The Fast and the Furious, so this is Paul Walker on the ascent. As much as I love Paul Walker, he's not the greatest actor, but he does a pretty decent job in this movie, and it also features Lily Sobieski, who's probably the third character in this movie, and also, of course, Rusty Nail, the voice we hear on the CB radio, Ted Levine, or Buffalo Bill, he's most known for.
Wait. Was she a great big fat person?
And Ted Levine was also in The Fast and Furious, so 2 movies in the same year with Paul Walker and Ted Levine. That's kind of weird in my opinion. And it's a horror thriller movie. It's a pretty straightforward horror thriller movie as well. A lot of tense moments in this movie. Very well written. It's got some cheesy moments. It does feel like Jeepers Creepers, which I believe came out the very same year as well, where it's kind of a road movie. Paul Walker and Steve Zahn are brothers. He's just getting out of jail, Steve Zahn, and Paul Walker's head in there. He's like, all right, fine, I'll pick him up. But Steve Zahn, he's a little bit of an idiot, and he gets the idea to put a CB radio in the car so they have something to do on this road trip. He's going to drop him off in Colorado. This is before cell phones. It gets a little bit boring in the car where all you have is the radio and each other, and after a while, you kind of just want to fuck around on a CB radio, and that's exactly what these guys decide to do, and they end up, talking to this trucker whose handle is Rusty Nail, and they decide to play a prank on him and say that their name is Lollipop. Paul Walker's going to pretend to be a girl named Lollipop and talk to this guy, kind of, lead him on, but things go a little bit too far, and then it just keeps escalating and escalating from there until we just get a very tension-filled third act in this movie where things go a little bit too far in my opinion at moments, but still it really does work for this film. Those moments are very, very tense. Steve Zahn gives a very standout performance in my opinion in this movie, and Ted Levine as that voice. Ted Levine has a very scary sounding voice, the poor bastard, and he is just so good in this movie interacting with Paul Walker and Steve Zahn. He really does add something to this movie. And like I was saying, because it's very well written, it's very well shot, it's actually a very enjoyable movie. It had a pretty big budget of like $23 million, which is pretty strange to me. It ended up making about $36 million at the box office, has some direct sequels. I believe I remember there being something of a remake with this movie. I am not 100% sure of that. You know, obviously it's something that could lead to many sequels, and that's why I got those 2 direct sequels. I just don't know if those movies are as good as this movie. For a movie with a very simple premise like this, it is very, very, very entertaining. It has some very tense moments, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie this time. And it really makes me wonder why it took me so long to revisit this movie. So thank you, Mr. Smelly Potato. Without you, I probably wouldn't have checked this movie out for a very long time again. I don't know why, I just kind of wrote it off. Paul Walker never really sells me on a movie. I know that, you know, people love him for the Fast and Furious movies, but I've just never thought he was the world's greatest actor. He's got a charm to him. I get that. He's very appealing. He's a very handsome fella. But I just never thought he was the world's greatest actor, and if you watch Too Fast, Too Furious, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But either way, that takes nothing away from his performance here in Joyride, and if I was going to give Joyride a score of 1 to 10, I would actually give Joyride a pretty damn solid 8 out of 10. I'm really surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie, so you guys should really check it out if you kind of wrote this one off. And last, but certainly not least, is The Night House. This one was directed by David Bruckner. It was written by Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski, and I think it's a very well-written movie. It stars Rebecca Hall, and she gives by far one of her best performances in this movie, and is the main reason you go and see this movie. This is Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, Director's Choice this month. And I gotta tell you, I remember I started this movie back in 2020 when it came out. You know, that was during the pandemic. And maybe it was 2021 when I finally checked it out. And I fell asleep about 15 minutes in. And I don't know why I never went back to it. I was really enjoying it, mainly because there's a scene very early in this movie that just shows off how good of an actress Rebecca Hall is. And that's why this part of the show is going to be completely filled with spoilers, because I want to talk a whole lot about this movie. And you really can't talk about this movie, in my opinion, without talking about the spoilers. So if you want to know nothing about The Night House, I would say, you know what, probably end the video here. Come back after you've seen the movie, and then, you know, you can find out what I really think about this movie. But I can definitely, at this point, recommend the movie to you guys. Check it out. It is really enjoyable. It's a great horror movie, and Rebecca Hall gives a great performance in this movie. So without further ado, spoiler warning is here. Let's talk about this movie. At the very beginning of this movie, we find out that Rebecca Hall's character, you know, her husband, unfortunately, he killed himself. He's dead now, and she's trying to get over that grief. She lives in their house that he built all alone, you know, no kids, nothing. She's just there in this big giant house right on the water. He took the boat out that they have right there on their pier out into the middle of the water there, the lake, and blew his brains out. There's no one else around them except for this one neighbor. And like she says earlier in the movie, she didn't even see this coming. She did not expect this at all. She was the one who struggled with some mental illness, and it wasn't him. He was always the positive one. So he kills himself, and now she's got to go on. And there's a scene right in the beginning. This is what I was talking about. Right in the beginning of the movie, she's a teacher, and unfortunately, the day her husband killed himself was also the last day of school. One of the mothers comes in and says, you know, you were supposed to do my son's project that day. You know, he was prepared and everything, and you weren't here. And she was like, oh, I had a personal matter that day. And she's like, well, my son got a C because of that. And she's like, okay, well, we'll excuse him and we'll give him a B. And she's still being like, you know, pushy the mother. You know, you were irresponsible. We're all busy. We all have personal problems. And then she's like, you know, my husband killed himself that day. So maybe that's why it was a personal matter I didn't want to bring up, and you pushed me a little bit too far. And of course, this mother now feels like a piece of shit, as she should. And Rebecca Hall starts to give a little bit of pushback.
Really doesn't matter to me right now. So, you want to be?
So this is great, just great acting by Rebecca Hall. And then, of course, when she goes back to her home, she starts to hear things. She also starts to sleepwalk. We notice that she's drinking a lot. You know, her friends are really worried about her. Even when they go out, she's starting to make like dark jokes about him killing herself, talking about the suicide note that he left. And, you know, it all starts to unravel, and it feels like this house might be haunted, that he knew something about this house. Now, in my opinion, all the stuff that's going on is all in Rebecca Hall's head, and it's because she's right now struggling not only with grief, she's clearly having an alcohol problem at this moment. She's not sleeping, she's sleepwalking just like her husband was. So he's definitely struggling mentally, in my opinion, as well. And that's why the suicide note says, you were right, there is nothing, because we also found out that Rebecca Hall's character, she was clinically dead for like 12 minutes and she saw nothing. And of course, he was more believing that there is something. And of course, as he comes to the conclusion there is nothing, that's when he decides to kill himself with no conclusive reason for her to understand. But she's going through all this. So all the stuff that she's hearing, all the stuff that she's seeing, it's not the house, it's just what she is going through. And it's a beautiful metaphor, and it's a beautiful allegory for grief. Losing a loved one like that, losing your husband, somebody you really love that you're with for 14 years. How much pain could that be? And to not be around your family and friends and living in the house that he built with his own two hands, and you're staying in this big house all alone. I was thinking right at the beginning, before it's even mentioned that he built it, that she should sell the house. It's way too big for one person, and she shouldn't be in that environment. I know if my wife ever died, God forbid, I would leave our house immediately, because this is our home. This isn't my home. This is our home. I don't want to be in a house that my wife isn't in. I'm gonna go somewhere else, and that's gonna be it. This is our house. So I can't imagine her staying in that house. Clearly she's not sleeping. Clearly she has an alcohol problem. We always see her in this movie with a glass of wine in her hand. So all that stuff, it's affecting her mental stability, and I think that's why she's having a breakdown, and she finally is coming out of it at the very end of this movie. And that's how I read The Night House. I'm very curious, what do you guys think of The Night House from what you saw when you watched this movie, if you saw it? I'm hoping you did, because I just spoiled what I believe this movie's about. So let me know what you guys think of The Night House in the comments section below. I know it got some mixed reviews, and everyone agreed at the time, though, that Rebecca Hall gives a great performance, as she always does. But this is the best performance she's ever given, and it's a showpiece for her. Everyone's really there to support her character, but it's really her movie. It's a very well-written movie, and I think in lesser hands, this wouldn't have been handled as well as I believe it was. And I think it's a fantastic horror film that you definitely should check out. If you haven't seen it, again, even though I just spoiled it, I can still definitely recommend it. And on a score of 1 to 10, I would give The Night House an 8.5 out of 10. I thought it was great. Definitely check this one out. I can't stress it enough. Even though I just spoiled it, it's still some great filmmaking in there. And thank you guys all for being here with me on another episode of the Let's Talk Review Show. I hope you guys enjoy these shows, and if you do enjoy them, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We also have channel memberships, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a channel producer, or a channel director, we have the producers tier where you're going to find John Doe Juggalo and Jason Martin. We have the directors tier where you're going to find Frank from Frank's Medium Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato, our channel directors, like we were talking about. If you guys want to join them, you can find all the perks down in the description below. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it all. All we hope is that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, make sure you get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.